me, we're ready to go.
Yeah, you're not talking, Nick. You're ready to sit down.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Jake is still there. Say hello, Jake. He's
Hello.
There. There he is. He was on mute. All right. All right.
I think you're going to be done with all your stuff in time.
All right. Okay, I'd like to call the public hearing for ordinance 16-1-4 to order. And first thing we're going to do is give some time to Lyle to introduce this.
Got a lot of paperwork, so pardon me. Yeah, as a quick introduction, it is on the item agenda for work item later today, so maybe I'll save some of the nitty-gritty to allow some time for public comment. But in short, in 2017, the state legislature passed a bill that essentially said, as they termed it or to summarize, home businesses that really don't create any more impact than a typical house would, whether there's a business or not, you can't charge them fees as a city to have them be licensed. And so in coordination with that and following up on that, Kaysville City passed an ordinance that essentially said home businesses, per the state statute, that aren't creating more impact than a typical house, accountant or someone that doesn't have people coming over, they're making phone calls, doing paperwork. Excuse me, we're still required to get a license. We felt at the time it'd be nice to track who's where, what they're doing, but that we wouldn't charge them any fees. So we've been administering the program for a little over a year now for about 488 home businesses without charging any fees on it. This past 2018 legislative session, the state said, okay, it's okay for cities to charge a reasonable fee to those types of businesses if they desire to have the license. So we can't necessarily require that they have it, but if somebody comes in and they want it for whatever purpose, and there are many who do come voluntarily to get them, that because we're running a program and there's some cost involved, that we could charge them a fee. So this would change it to that paradigm again, where at a voluntary basis, a home business, should they desire, that's considered a minor home occupation, can come in, we'll get them a license, but it's going to come at a cost to them. So that's my 2 cents. I'll be happy to take questions, but turn it back to the council for the hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Lyle. Since this is a public hearing, we will invite anybody to come forward to speak to this. We will not be able to respond to you, but you can give your feedback to us. You have 3 minutes. I don't currently see anybody in the audience who is here to speak to that, but I'm going to wait until for 5 minutes to, we'll keep the hearing open just in case somebody comes in. So we'll just meditate on what we're going to be doing.
Be very mindful at this moment.
Yes, okay. having a public hearing talking about the business licensing. Perchance, are you here to speak to that? Okay. Neither is anybody else. I say that's close enough. All right. We will close the public hearing for this ordinance. 5 more minutes, and then we'll start our city council meeting.
Are YouTube recording still on? Microphone's still on? I like it.
Pardon?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah.
Thanks.
You bet.
agenda, so.
Hey, what's up, Lyle? How you doing? I know, right? I don't have a nameplate yet. I'm not official. It's Maria's fault.
Oh my gosh. What's the date? 16th. Okay. Okay. I'd like to call the August 16th, 2018 City Council meeting to order. A couple things before we start. I'd like to recognize that Councilmember Jake Garn is with us on the phone, and also welcome to our new Councilmember, Stro DeCare. All right. For our opening, we would like to introduce Pastor Joe Kopp, who will give our invocation, followed by the pledge by Stro. Councilmember DeCare.
I am Pastor Joe Kopp. I'm with Kaysville Bible Church, just right down the road on 200 North, and then where Flint crosses. So thankful to be there. I've just been there for about 3 years as the assistant pastor, along with Pastor Tommy Jeffcott. And I work a lot with the youth group and the children all the way up through the college age. That's kind of my responsibility. Just a quick little update on what we're doing these days. It's kind of neat. Pastor Tommy's been having our Sunday morning series, and you're always welcome to come worship with us at 11 o'clock each Sunday morning. But we have a really neat series where we're going through and answering questions about the origins of the earth, origins of all of creation around us. And so it's really neat to see what the Bible says about that. And we take the Bible very seriously and very literally. And so if you're ever interested in what we do, anyone's welcome at all times to be able to come by and visit with us, worship with us on Sunday mornings, 11 o'clock, right over there at Kaysville Bible Church. So, all right, let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, we do thank you so much for this evening. We thank you for this opportunity to be able to meet and discuss the needs of the city. I pray that you would be in this meeting, you would be leading, guiding, directing. I pray that you give us wisdom. Lord, we know that you're in control of the rulers. We know that you're in control of the ones who make these decisions. And so we pray that you would be doing that. Thank you so much for such a beautiful city. Thank you so much for a place that we can take part in the community and plug in different areas. And we thank you for your love and your grace to us personally. Pray that you would show that in different ways. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
If everybody could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll start with, does anybody have any conflicts of interest for this evening?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go on to our consent items. Anybody want to move that?
I'll make a motion that we move on consent items A, B, C, and D without any dialogue or conversation.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Garn. Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember DeCare and seconded by Councilmember Garn. Let's start with Councilmember Adams.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
I mean, on A, I believe that's your daughter. Is there no conflict of interest that we could disclose there on the record? And B, about that, I think that merits a little bit of discussion. You know,
So
whether we have nepotism rules in our HR, and I don't think we should just blow through that.
Okay, so you would like to have pulled A to discuss.
Yeah.
Perhaps you would like to do a substitute motion?
I think in the past we've just pulled them out. I don't know.
Well, he's already moved the consent, right?
Okay.
So if you would like to do a substitute motion?
Fabulous. Substitute motion that we have a discussion about A.
Okay. All right. And a second for that?
Second.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm twisted up. So what we're going to do is we are moving consent minus A, and then we'll circle back and talk about A. Is that what you heard? Yeah. Okay. So, Councilmember Adams.
I would have thought you would have raised that in declaration of conflict of interest.
First, what we're doing is we're moving the rest of the consent agenda. So
Understood.
that's what we'll do first.
My mistake.
Okay.
Aye.
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 And Jake, Councilmember Garn, thank you. All right, it passes unanimously. Let's talk about A. Shane, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, the purpose of this being on here is because there is a potential conflict with the mayor. I believe that it's in the city's best interest to use a match in this service. I believe we're getting the best rate we possibly can get, and we've been happy. So we've used her on several occasions, and she's just never charged us. And I don't think that's a good way for the city to do business. I think we ought to pay for professional services when we need them. So we got a quote from her, and because she is the mayor's daughter, we put that on the agenda here for your for y'all to be aware of. And of course, if you don't think we should do that, that's your prerogative. But I think that's what's best for the city, and that's why we have it on this consent agenda item.
Yeah, and I definitely wanted to make not only the council members aware, but also the citizens aware, the residents aware that my daughter would be doing work for the city. She's giving us mates rates, as it were. I can't pay her in Diet Coke forever, so that's that. It is infrequent, but she's very quick, she's good, and she's cheap. So that's why it's here.
Can I add one other thing? I would also echo or like to just make sure that we're clear that the mayor shouldn't ask for these services from her daughter, and she wouldn't do that. It'll be a staff member, probably me, maybe even Maria at times, that will see a need there and require those services of her. So.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused. Should you be in here discussing this?
I am not going to vote on this.
Declared.
You know, that's a good
Probably
point.
should have declared this too.
Yeah, but since I don't vote, I don't think it's as pertinent.
Your influence over the body is
all right.
debatable.
Okay. All right. So, any other questions?
I think it could be put out in the open. It could be advertised on the website. It could be a fair process to all. I don't think it necessarily needs to come down to, well, she's cheaper. It's like, well, okay, is it a bona fide business that we're hiring, or is this just out of a bedroom, which is fine, but I think it ought to be put out into an open process, and could potentially this evolve into maybe handling, I think it's our graphic work on the internet. Could it evolve into at some point, messages that could be deemed as being biased as the mayor's daughter? I mean, I think these are things that will actually help protect you, but I think it could be a little bit more of an open process. I think to just come to this meeting, no declaration from you, quick boom. I think we could slow it down and say, hey, throw it out on the website. Anybody like to do it, or the graphic work, or call some companies, or I think a little bit more official procedure is in order.
Okay.
Eric, can I address that?
Sure.
The services there are well under the threshold for requiring bids. I did go out and look at what this kind of service would cost, and then I've included that in your packet. So if we were to have to, every time we get a consultant, to go out to put it on the website and go out to bid, it's just really counterproductive to trying to be efficient. Again, it is absolutely your prerogative. If you don't feel like we should do this just to stay away from it, that's fine. But at the same time, this is a very appropriate thing for the city to do in a city like ours. I've seen this many times in other cities when a council member has provided a service to the city or has received some benefit from the city, and then when it's done above board, in this regard, it's completely appropriate.
Councilmember Barber.
Just in thinking about this and looking into it this week, I think if there are residents who feel like they're also qualified and have services, whether graphic design or other, they can always make themselves known and come to the city and offer that up. and it's great to know about local talent, maybe in other ways that we could know about. But I think that might give other options as well.
Anybody else? All right. Councilmember Garn, anything? Okay. All right. I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consulting services with Madgewit.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Barber and seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Councilmember Page.
Aye.
Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. All right, going on to our action items. A mini excavator purchase. I think that is going to be Josh Belknap.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you can see in your packet, there's 2 items in there from us. First is a staff member report. Second is an invoice or quote for the purchase of a new mini excavator, trading in our current unit and utilizing that trade-in value towards the purchase of a new excavator. Excuse me. This item was on the agenda for the last council meeting as a consent item that was tabled for further discussion, and so I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We have had the report. I am waiting to see if there's anybody signed up to speak to this item. Thank you. All right, no one has signed up to speak to this item, so we will open it up for questions from council members. Any questions from council members? Councilmember Adams.
How many hours are on the existing machine?
So as shows in the invoice or the quote that was in the packet last time, there are 1,760 hours as of May. As I looked at it today, there's a little over 1,980.
Okay.
The explanation as to why the new machine was that we need to get into tighter spaces, I believe, and to lift more. But comparing the specs side to side, they're almost, there's really not much difference between the 2 machines, other than mainly where the boom mounts. And then in speaking with people in the industry, 2,000 hours isn't really. It's not really a mark, where you really need to dispose of a machine. So I've got a little bit of reservation there with about a $60,000 expense. Granted, I get it. I know that this council, well, minus Mr. DeCare, voted the budget in, and people could just say, stamp it away, let's go. The budget's been voted. But, we just sat through a hearing where we're going to be gathering, where this council is looking at truth in taxation. We heard concerns from residents about taxes going up, the road fee, all the stuff that I'm just looking for ways, perpetually looking for ways that we can conserve and cut back and save. And is what we have currently, does it, still perform? Could that $60,000 be put, obviously your department's over roads, put into some roads. Now I get one could argue it's insignificant, the drop in the bucket. I've heard that a lot over little things, but it seems like the little things add up. So without any more wearing that down, the other question that I have on top of those concerns is, were there any other companies that we bid out on this machine? I believe that this is the government contract, right? The John Deere?
Yeah, state contract.
Does that prohibit us from bidding it out to other vendors? I mean,
no, we just did it to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Looking for a more streamlined process. It's within the parameters of the procurement policy.
Sure, I'm not arguing that at all, but I think in the spirit of the policy, it definitely wouldn't hurt to take a look at other vendors and see what's out there. The funny thing of this day and age is that, like, a John Deere has a Yanmar engine in it, It's a totally different excavator brand. So it's not really like the John Deere, they're just components assembled by John Deere. So if it's a John Deere preference you have, which I'm not going to make an assumption here, I doubt it is, I don't think it would hurt to throw this out to all the other tractor vendors and see where they sit. I also, like expressing the concern earlier, don't see the need to really make the expense at this time.
So in looking at the current machine that we have, which is a 75D, compared with an 85D, the 3 items, like you mentioned, one was where the boom is mounted, giving us the ability to get into tighter spaces. On the front end, there is a 1,000-pound lifting capacity difference increase with the machine that we're looking at. And the 85D is 1,000 pounds heavier, which acts as better counterweight as we're attempting to lift items, excavate items, thrust blocks, etc. So those were the reasons of 75 versus 85. And I don't think it's a drop in the bucket. As a resident of Kaysville, that's a significant amount of money. But our concern is an issue of economic life, a technical term used in accounting to account for depreciation, account for maintenance costs, account for opportunity costs as equipment goes down or is in service or is not operating at its full capacity. Private industry, it is a little difficult to compare to with public. A few differences there is access to funding, the timing of funding. Also, we don't have the option, and not to say that we're any better off or worse off than private industry, but we don't have the option to limit the work that we're overseeing, limit the work that we're in charge of. That's a set point that's constantly growing. We don't have the ability to say, excuse me, that we're not going to take a job because we can't keep up with the demand. And we're also expected to operate at all hours, call out in the middle of the night, where it's difficult to call a company, try and procure a rental, and wait for its arrival. So looking at cost analysis, which I think was an item mentioned in the previous council meeting, market analysis, cost analysis, we looked at one from 2015 from the state of Minnesota, looking at equipment within public utilities, recommending for heavy equipment an economic life of 4 to 8 years for equipment, of what's the trade-off, positives and negatives. Looked at studies from the United Nations, of all places, and Iowa State, and echoed similar findings. So we have a lot to take care of. We have a lot that we're trying to do. And just like private industry, if something goes down, that is costing money. If something goes down, we're not out money, but we're out opportunity. We're out the ability to respond in a more timely manner.
And that would be if we didn't have a machine, right? But we do have a machine. So
we have
still
a machine.
Responding. We're not having to rent. In your opinion, we're in our, fourth or fifth year, depending on which year we bought it.
Fifth year.
So into the fifth year. In your opinion, would the machine last for 2 or 3 more years? In the private, since you brought up the private sector, the typical turnover is around the 5,000 to 6,000 hour range, just so the people in the city have an idea of, in the comparison. So would it get us 2 or 3 more years and help bolster some of the cost issues that we're facing all across the board?
Yeah, it definitely could, and that's an item that these studies, as we looked at them, said that that's a great number of hours or a time frame to look at in private industry. But again, they are drawing a very stark difference between a public entity, not just from the work that they do and the frequency and the volume, but from funding and other timing standpoints. That there's a significant difference there. We could wait, but as I stated in the staff report, we've experienced some maintenance issues. We're seeing signs of potential issues on the horizon. We don't want to throw money into a machine if we don't have to, when we feel like trading that out, even if we weren't seeing maintenance issues. Our feeling is that about every 5, like this said, 4 to 8 years, but in that 5 range, looking to refresh and make sure that we have the absolute ability to respond in the middle of a night on a water leak or whatever the situation might be.
Councilmember DeCare.
So I can appreciate Councilmember Adams, where he's coming from with this, the cost and things along those lines. I am curious though as to so we're taking a piece of equipment with 2,000 hours on it, roughly, give or take, and I'm assuming that because it's not near end of life, that our trade-in value on that is going to be not maybe exponentially higher, but higher to a degree where we're going to be able to get more back and be able to, kind of use it as a better leverage and kind of get, a little bit more bang for our buck with the trade-in. Is that
correct? Yeah. So the trade-in value now obviously is higher than the trade-in value would be,
like 2 or 3 years from now or whatever.
A year, 2 years, et cetera. Yeah, absolutely. So that economic life, which is defined as the expected period of time during which an asset is useful economically to the average owner, us being public, the economic life of an asset could be different than its actual physical life. So what are the benefits that we're getting versus what are the drawbacks of moving forward? And as we have looked at this extensively leading up to the budget and then also jumping back in over the last couple of weeks to make sure, are we really doing the right thing? That is the feeling that the department has, myself especially.
The only simple counter to that is as soon as that machine has 100 hours,
Councilmember Adams.
It's going to lose 10%.
Councilmember Adams, you have not been called on, so I'm going to please just let me do my job. Councilmember Adams, would you like to make a comment?
I already did, ma'am.
Okay, great. Councilmember Garn, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm just curious on the state contract pricing. Is the reason we use that sometimes the state has already gone out to bid, they've awarded a certain contract for certain items, pieces of equipment or whatever, services, perhaps sometimes, maybe not on all items, but where we have the ability to take advantage of that state contract pricing, it's already gone through a process similar to what we would do here in Kaysville. Is that correct? And also, is the reason that we would go ahead with it is that there's a cost to going out to bid, time cost, and so we're able to take advantage of that state contract pricing. Do I have that correct?
Correct, yeah. So it's a very thorough vetting process that state contract, regardless of what the item is going through, and I believe that's why it was included in the procurement policy, is the thorough vetting process.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Page, anything?
Yeah, I guess the only thing actually that's not a bad idea, even though you're going through the state contract here, but we're assuming that they're getting a great deal, which I'm sure they are. I just don't think that's a bad idea to go out and have some other people bid on it as well in the future. I mean, it's just a little bit of effort, but you just never know. So, yeah,
definitely not opposed to that, and I think there's wisdom in both you gentlemen recommending that. So we'll
Could I ask a follow-up question on that, Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Garn.
It may depend on the circumstances. I don't necessarily disagree with Councilmember Page, but I do wonder then why Kaysville and other cities would have that in their purchasing policy if we're never going to avail ourselves of the efficiency involved in using state contract pricing. If every time you're going to go out to bid, then there's no point in even availing yourself in the policy of state contract pricing.
How hard is it to solicit?
Councilmember Adams, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, how hard is it to solicit bids? We're belaboring this. You email out, here's what we're looking to buy, they email back. There's not a cost to that.
If we have to follow, if we remove the state bid from the procurement policy, for example, in this case, we'd have to go out to an RFP. It can be very extensive. So if we're talking about every single purchase that we make that's over $25,000, it would be an RFP process. If it's between $5,000 and $25,000, we would have to get 3 bids. If you just say it for one item, it's not that big a deal. But when you add up all the things that we procure on an annual basis, it's a tremendous amount of work and time and effort on this part of the staff. And as Councilman Garn just mentioned, there is a purpose in why the state has vetted these things out for cities like ours to be able to take advantage of an already vetted price, that we can be comfortable with that price and know that it had been vetted by another organization, and we can save ourselves that time and effort.
Councilmember Barber.
$115,000 purchase.
Councilmember Barber.
Merits the time.
You had a question.
No, I have a comment.
Okay.
This is question time.
It's question time.
So no, I do not have a question.
I'd entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve the excavator trade-in and purchase.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember Barber.
Substitute.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll make a substitute that we do not approve the purchase of the excavator, and we help allow it to help shoulder the burden of our budgets throughout the next 12 months, and we revisit the purchase.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion? The motion dies for lack of a second. We'll go on to comments. Councilmember Barber.
My comment echoed what about the procurement policy. I had a lot of questions last week, so I talked to Josh quite a bit, last meeting is what I meant. And also about the dean's, our financial recommendation about purchasing versus leasing and weighing out all those options. And I think Josh did a good job of explaining it. As far as the vendor pricing that we have negotiated, I would say maybe overall we look at it, but not on a case-by-case basis, because I think if we have to go out to RFP every single time, that does completely change the process.
Any other comments? Councilmember DeCare, did you have something?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Anything else, Councilmember Adams? No? Okay. All right. We'll go to a vote. Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 4-1. Okay. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll go to adoption of the certified tax rate and final budget. Dean, do you want to address that? Or Shane, sorry.
Sorry, we talked about this just earlier. As you know, we had the public hearing, and what we're looking for you tonight is, as in this action item, is the adoption of the certified tax rate and final budget. Of course, the staff recommendations we do as presented. I think it's important that we take action tonight. We are up against the deadline, and would obviously be here to entertain any questions.
Okay, thank you. We don't have anybody signed up to speak to this item, so we'll go to questions from council. What questions do we have? Okay. No questions. I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move that we approve the notice of the proposed tax rate.
Okay. And Shane?
It is a resolution,
That's a
and
resolution.
I'm probably comfortable with Councilmember Barber's intent, but if you want to mention the certified tax rate and the final budget.
Final budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Make a motion that we approve the certified tax rate and the budget.
The final budget.
Final budget.
Okay. And second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Barber, seconded by Councilmember Page. Any comments at this time? Councilmember Page. Councilmember Garn, you'll be second. I'm going to have Councilmember Page first.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure as part of that motion that we do exactly what you said before, that we're actually going to put it in for capital improvements.
Good point.
It'll be
yes.
earmarked
for capital improvements.
That is in the.
It's in the
packet.
resolution.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Case.
Thanks for clarifying that, Councilmember Page. Councilmember Garn?
Yes, thank you. I just want to mention I had the opportunity to do a article for the newsletter talking about the history of property taxes, the most hated tax, and it is true that that the valuations, and still in many states, can go up, and the recipients of that, whether local or state, can receive what could be considered to be a windfall. So in the 1980s, they changed it with the truth in taxation laws that basically keep the revenue steady except for growth. And if you keep the revenue steady, of course, you're subject to inflation. I just wanted to point out real quickly that since the last tax increase, which I believe had been a period of about 20 years, and was a 100% tax increase, that was done in 2013 for the, I believe, 2014 fiscal year. And since that time, the inflation rate overall, I won't go through the yearly amounts, but is, even though it's been lower in recent years, has been 14%. So if you look at it in those terms, the purchasing power of the city over that same period of time, we're only making up half of that difference compared to the consumer price index. That's an important concept. It's one that I was not aware of even before getting involved in city government, even though I'm a CPA. But that is one of the reasons why it goes up. And I do understand that people who are living on a fixed income, their income does not go up proportionately. It seems like everything else does. And if I had an answer, it could solve inflationary pressure on the economy, I would do that. But unfortunately, I don't have that ability to know how to solve that. But it is important that we keep up with it, and we do it every year and make an assessment. But it has been 4 or 5 years now, and I don't want to fall into the same trap that we did in previous years where we go 20 years without an increase and then have a large increase. I'd rather have it done every year and have an incremental look at it. There may be some years where we don't keep the tax rate the same, or where we allow it to fall with increasing property values because we've been able to keep up. But I think we should at least consider it every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garn. Anybody else with comments? Councilmember Barber.
I really appreciate everybody that came out to the public hearing before, and we've all had lots of people comment and contact us about this increase. No one ever likes to see those words come across at all, but as it says in our packet, an average, I don't know if the 364 is a median house value.
It's the average value in Kaysville.
The average house value in Kaysville, so $364,000. So it would increase for residents about $20 per year at that average. So you can adjust for your house on there. And I realize $20 a year, it adds up, especially with all the other increases. But I know I've said this a lot before, that just like Councilmember Garn said, the cost of maintaining a city is continually going up as well. So we don't take this lightly, increasing it all, but we also have to be conscious of the other expenses that we have. So I think this is a good balance. I wouldn't like to see it, go extremely high anymore, because I think we can keep up with it at this rate. I wouldn't, and every year, maybe we do decrease it if property values are predicted to cover enough. But anyway, so thank you everyone who's contacted us.
Right. Councilmember DeCare, anything?
With regard to taxes, I don't want to go way off in the weeds and stuff and that, but I think what we have to look at with taxes is, with property taxes, is the value that we get for the price that we pay for our yearly property tax. I personally pay $260, $270 a year for property taxes, and I have to look at that amount as, is that a fair and equitable price that I pay to have a full-service city at my disposal. A city that has fire, parks and recreation, public safety, public works, a power generation department, the full gamut, 105 full staff employees. Is that money that I pay, is that something that's worth it to me to reside in this city, to have my streets plowed in the winter and all that stuff? I look at the price that I pay for a year as a very fair and equitable and just amount for living within Kaysville City. So to echo Councilmember Barber, granted we're looking at a $20 a year increase. It does add up with everything else. But to echo Councilmember Garn, I would much rather see things done on a more incremental, and yearly or every couple of years kind of a scenario, instead of waiting a decade or two and then all of a sudden springing something upon the residents and kind of leaving them reeling and saying, well, gosh, why didn't we look at this, with a little bit different lens, and so that's kind of where I reside on that.
All right, thanks. Councilmember Adams.
The sentiment, I can go along with some of the sentiment on the table here, but I listened to the comments too, and I've been the recipient of comments and people's feelings and their ways of looking at this. And, the way I look at it is the way I've always looked at it. I don't think anyone is against, like what you're saying, like paying for what you receive.
Sure.
They want to, but we need to keep in mind the blind spot here. It's when we allow so much money to flow through our fingertips without any scrutiny. And I am kind of scrutinizing, not so much you, it's your first meeting, but I'm going to scrutinize us as a board. We just allow it to flow through our fingertips. That is where the disconnect happens with the people. When everything that hits our agenda is just spend it, spend it, spend it, spend it. And I'm not talking out of the side of my mouth here. I've sat here for 2.5 years, that's how it's been, and I've observed before that. And I don't mean on every level. I'm not looking to offend former council members or anything of that nature. I'm just saying that when the people never see the council say, no, we're not spending that. No, the time's not right. And then all of a sudden, well, we got a road fee now. We've got truth in taxation. Taxes going up now. We had a 100% increase a few years ago. And nobody argues with the fact that needs, like real needs, not wants. We could debate wants and needs for quite a while. Nobody argues the fact in this city, it's my belief, per se, nobody argues the fact that needs need to be met. But it's when the wants cloud the needs. There's been a lot of money that has been spent this year already, which I get. Some of that perhaps is a need. But I think the disconnect happens when the folks, just like we heard the comments tonight, all organizations have to look at budgets and cut. I mean, even when it comes down to almost everything I've seen in the budget sitting here over the years, I've been heavily scrutinized for asking the questions. I don't think that's a jerk thing to do. And then everything is just, well, pass it through. It's recommended by staff, they need it, whatever. I think that's where the bad rub comes for the people. When they just... So for me, I disagree with this. I'm not a part of it. I don't agree with it. I'm not going along with it. And those are the reasons why. If I were to see the council say, you know what, we can get along with this a little bit longer. I asked staff members before I became a council member, hey, if we don't touch what you take home to your family, I think that's the most important thing. Is staff members need to be able to take home and take care of their families, and it needs to be at a competitive market rate. But if we say we're not going to give you power windows in your truck and not a deluxe radio, are you cool with that? And the ones I spoke with anyway were like, that's totally fine. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever I need to do when I'm at work is great, but I just want to be able to take care of my family when I go home. So not to go on a tirade here, but at what point do we say, you know what, that excavator will last another year, or the $90,000 snowplow truck that you guys bought last year, or the $250,000 Vector truck that you guys bought 2 weeks ago? At what point do you say, wait a minute here, what about the existing fleet? Will that work for this work for that? So I've said enough. I think people understand where I sit and how I feel about it. And I think there's some clarity in what I'm saying about why people come in and feel this way.
Okay. Councilmember Page.
Yeah, I would just like to say this, that, everybody has a different philosophy, and Dave and myself, we probably disagree with each other on he's owned businesses, I've owned businesses. I'm probably more of the opinion I don't run equipment until it wears out, and then, in an ideal world, that's probably one of the better ways of doing it if you're, but I've found that I tried to keep my equipment, top peak. My big thing is you lose money when you have downtime. I think when we're talking about a city, you don't have that luxury. They have to perform completely. And I think that's important. But I think a bigger issue is we hold the city manager accountable, and there's a philosophy of what needs to be done, and the philosophy. I think it's important, if we have these kind of questions, we go talk to them. That's what we do. We find out, everything doesn't have to be in the public eye where you sit there and you make yourself look good if you want to do it that way. But you know what you can do is you can go and you can ask them and say, hey, do you really need this? What's the reasons why? Those conversations, they're more than happy to talk about those kind of things. What's your philosophy going forward? What are we looking at? How long do you want to keep a piece of equipment? What's your vision of the future? What are you trying to accomplish? And I think that's an important question to ask right there. So I don't know. I think we let Josh do his job, to be honest with you.
I don't think that's the item, Council Member.
Well, I think he needs to do his job, and he's presented. We've already approved the budget, so I'm fine with it.
I think we've moved on from that item.
All right. I'll just say that I think we learned a lesson from the not 100%, but very close to 100% tax increase that happened in 2013. And that was because people didn't want to have to do truth in taxation. And so we shoestrung the city together, and I think as a result we have some catching up that needs to be done, especially if you look at our roads and some other issues. And we want to be very careful with the resources that have been entrusted by the citizens to the city, and that is why Councilmember Barber goes and spends hours talking to the department heads so that she clearly understands what she is voting on. And then she'll mention it as she comes in. She'll say, I went and talked to so-and-so, and here's what they said. And I had a concern, and this is what the answer was. So when we're talking about, it really is, truth in taxation is a way for us to open up the books, show our people what we think the needs are. I want to be clear that the money, the additional money that will be coming in is dedicated to capital improvement projects. We have been looking at, we have a dire need for additional office space, storage space. You probably can't see this at home, but we have partitioned off part of council chambers to make office space for our workers. And so we are trying to be very careful with the resources that have been given to us. And truth in taxation, if we do it every year, that helps us keep our nose above water. We're not going to try to suck the city dry and buy excessive implements and things that the city does not need. So I feel that when I have seen the amount of work by our council members who have taken the time to talk to our department heads and really dig in, I feel really confident and comfortable coming to the people and saying, we are being very judicious with the monies that you are entrusting with us. And we appreciate the comments and the concerns specifically for those less fortunate in our community. And that's why it's important to do this every year, so we do not hit people with a huge tax increase when our backs are against the wall. We don't want to get ourselves into that position. So I think everybody's, yes, Councilmember Barber?
Thank you. I think Councilmember Adams brings up some really, really good points. Specifically to me, I think that shows we need to do better at communication as well with our residents, because as a budget comes, you just see expenses, but you're not seeing the other side. You're not seeing things that aren't coming forward that we're not purchasing. And so we could do a better job of that. I don't know a lot. When we had our budget meeting, we talked about Chief Oberg, I believe, last year said, we could use this, but we know there are other departments that need it. They returned some money that they didn't spend, decided not to hire that year. Things like that we could residents, and maybe we have something that comes with truth in taxation or a revolving item that shows areas we're not spending. We talked to Public Works on a completely separate item it was the customer portal. I'd looked into a lot. It was going to be about $20,000. And I just said to Josh, I don't think this does what we need it to do. Can we wait? We looked into it, went back and forth for over a week. We decided not to buy it. And maybe we will in the future when it meets our needs. That's just one example, but I don't know that it came through. We didn't do a good job of communicating that. So I think we can do a lot better. And then my second thing I was going to say that keeps coming up is it is really hard to do these increases, specifically with residents on these fixed incomes. It's really hard. I don't know what the perfect solution is, but I do know that the property tax valuation is somewhat trying to accommodate for different income levels, and so it's not a regressive tax. It's the same for everybody, but I don't know. There's got to be something we can do at a city level that accommodates for that population, because it weighs on you when you think of those people that they don't have additional money coming in. Even if it's a small increase, it's going to hit them.
That's right. All right. All right. So I think we're ready for a vote. All right. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Okay, Lyle. I think he is going to be. Is it just C or C and D? Which combination?
I think it'd behoove us, Mayor, if it's all right with the council, to look at C and D together. And we will want a separate motion for each, as they're technically different items, but where it's essentially the same project. I'll introduce them both. So we're looking at 993 South on Sunset Drive. Sorry, I thought I had a clicker that was going to let me do it from up here, so I may sit down in a second if I have to keep going back and forth. But so the property you can see here on the map, it's one that's between Sunset and the DNRG Rail Trail. Pretty deep lot. It's just over 4 acres of property total, and the applicants that are looking to develop it are looking for the R1 LD zoning district, and we've seen this more and more frequently. It's our single-family, low density, allows up to 2 unit per acre type development, but it does give a little bit of flexibility in the lot size, so not every lot's half an acre. It allows them to be as small as 12,000 square feet, so you'll have smaller and larger lots within it, but still the overall net density that seems to be well received with the general plan at the 2 unit per acre language that's in there west of I-15. So with that, the council does have the discretion in their decision on if the zoning is appropriate based on the specific site and how you think it goes in line with the general plan and the city's vision. They're proposing a subdivision that includes, they got a lot of items that are bogging me down tonight. So we got 6 lots total on this, and it's a little bit tough to see on this map as it's a scan, but you have 1 lot back up against the trail, and then 5 lots, one that's existing on the home that faces Sunset Drive. So it's essentially 5 new homes on the property. It's actually well below the 2 unit per acre. Typically they could get 8 lots, having 4 acres out of the R1 LD. And they do actually include a full right-of-way for a public street that would wrap around, connect to an existing stub, and onto Sunset Drive. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing both for the rezone and for the preliminary plat as shown here. Based on that, the Planning Commission has given a recommendation to the council to approve both the R1 LD district as requested and the preliminary plat as presented. I'd be happy to take questions on either, and there's also a property owner and applicant here that could enlighten you more if you wish to speak to them.
Okay, just a minute.
Sorry.
So we will now take I don't have anybody signed up to comment on either C or D, so we'll move to council questions. Councilmember DeCare.
So Lyle, looking at this here, so where, I mean, that's a bad.
Great image. Huh?
The other one
That's
is
bad,
better.
man.
Go to
That's
the other one. I think is better, easier to look at. Well, maybe not.
no.
There's another, that one, I think.
Yeah, but that
I
doesn't
don't
show any, nothing.
Imagine it.
Oh, imagine it. All right, I'll put my imagination hat on here. So let's see. So we're looking at this road here. This is going to go in here, right? Correct?
Correct.
And then is it going to end up curving out this way and onto Sunset?
Yeah, so Preakness Drive would be extended into the property, and it will allow it to be essentially stubbed in some fashion for potential future development on these lots. And then, as stated, it turns and it goes all the way back out to Sunset Drive. So it's not a dead end, no cul-de-sac. It creates the connectivity that typically we desire from development when possible, and also allows, again, increased potential for those properties to the north. So we thought it was a pretty good idea from staff. The Planning Commission likewise concurred.
And essentially what we're looking at then here is, it was six properties?
6 total lots.
In 4 acres, so that totally meets the the ordinance there. So they're going to butt onto the existing back of these properties here, I'm assuming, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like it was done in the turn of the century or something. It's all good though, right?
It's fine. It's good.
Easy, council member. Easy.
Data's all there, we promise.
All right.
It's the scan that, it does do a lot to it, so.
That's fine.
Okay.
Apologize.
I'm
Okay.
good.
Other questions? Councilmember Adams?
Full improvement, full right-of-way, we'll call it the green section, so even the north side, curb and gutter there too, right?
Yeah, great question. So here along the east edge, it's the full 55-foot right-of-way, curb, gutter, sidewalk on both sides of the street. What's been shown here on the north side in the dark green color is it's actually 45 feet of right-of-way. So on the north end, it will have curb and gutter and all street improvements, and on the south side would be the sidewalk. Reason for that, it essentially sets itself up to be the typical right-of-way of 55 feet. If and when the properties to the north choose to develop, they would then be required to finish the sidewalk and that remaining piece. So, it is just shy of the typical 55, but it's prepared to be that.
Yeah. I mean, the future will bring it.
Correct.
So, no, I think that's fair, and I think that's fair to the developer. We're getting sidewalk on one side, and and then there's obviously ample room for a fire truck to make that corner. So that was the only other concern. Other than that, just a kudos to the developers, which I do not know, by the way. That's a great plan. It keeps a great open space of West Kaysville, good feel. So.
Any more questions? Councilmember Gurn, anything? I guess not. All right. Okay. Seeing that there are no more questions, I will entertain a motion at this time.
Well, I move that we rezone the 4 acres at 993 Sunset Drive from an A1 to an R1 LD and preliminary plat for the Brady Estate.
Let's break it out and do a
Just
vote
one?
for one and
Okay.
then vote for the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do the rezone then from an A1 to an R1 LD.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Page and seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments? Seeing none, Councilmember DeCare.
Aye.
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 Councilmember Garn? Councilmember.
Sorry, aye.
Okay, thank you.
Pick it up.
And Councilmember Barber?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then I will entertain a motion for item D for the preliminary plat.
Only because that preliminary plat is so stellar looking, I motion that we approve item D.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second because it
Okay.
is awesome.
All right, so it's been moved by Councilmember Adams and seconded by
Did we
Councilmember
bring
Barber.
love back in the room?
And any other comments? No. All right.
I did want to say one. I had a comment.
Comment.
The
yes,
only comment
Councilmember
on the
Barber.
preliminary plat is, I think, looking at these and other layouts that will come, I mean, looking at that overlay, there could be a lot more divisions like this. I think it's set up for a good use of that space and lot-wise, and especially access, which is always our question. That road looks like it's well-planned and will come through. So I hope that sets a really great standard for that area of our city. So thanks, wonderful.
All right. Okay, let's have a vote. Councilmember Adams.
Can I make a quick comment? It's
Sure,
not,
sure.
I mean, it's semi-germane. Brady, it just dawned on me, Brady Estates is like a one-home, so the sidewalk likely never will come along the north side. But personally, we're getting sidewalk on one side. For me, I just wanted to kind of bring clarity to all of us, for maybe whoever hasn't driven by. That may not ever happen with Brady Estates. I don't know. I doubt it would, but I think it's fair on all sides. And Brady's are not here to have any rebuttal for it. Oh, they are? Oh, you're Miss Brady. Okay.
Well, I'm Robin Bartell. I own Elroy Brady was my dad.
Oh, in the really nice, so the property that got demolition this week is yours.
Yes.
Okay, and then the Brady is next door to you, correct?
No, the area being developed is Brady. The Olsons live on the north of my dad, and he is not developing at this time. He has, I believe, 3 acres, and that's what
Go to that
the
other
side
map.
will butt up against.
Yeah.
The Brady Estates is actually what is being developed. The area within the yellow boundaries is all Brady Estates.
Okay. And then right next to that is that nice home we're talking about, or the,
On the north, yes,
the-
it's a white home with a
Yeah.
equestrian barn.
Okay.
behind it. It's been very nice. And then Cottonwood is the street on the south.
okay. Thanks for clarifying. Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Voting is unanimous. All right, thank you. Thank you, Bertos. Now we'll go to E, preliminary plat approval for Tyler Meadows Phase 2.
Okay. You may remember just recently the council rezoned this property here off of 1020 and 1034 West Smith Lane. It's right across the street from Centennial Junior High and Snow Horse Elementary. It was zoned to the R1LD district with the intent. I'm going to sit down, Mayor and Council, if that's okay with you, and I think this will get less awkward.
I'll allow it this time.
Struggling with the tech. I apologize. So at the time of the rezone proposal, the developer brought before the Planning Commission and ultimately the council. This plan before you is the concept plan that they hope to do with the cul-de-sac type development. Not a great deal of difference, but they've gone through and fleshed out the details and have put together the final preliminary plat, well, the preliminary plat for your consideration. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on the item. There was a unanimous recommendation to pass along a favorable vote to the council to approve the plat as proposed.
All right, thank you. Let's see if anybody's signed up on this. Right.
And the developer is here as well as myself for questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Nobody has signed up to speak to this item, so we'll go to questions from council members. Councilmember DeCare.
How many acres is that, Lyle? How big is that piece of property? Is it 6?
Yeah.
probably
No,
pretty
I'm sorry. I was saying it says in here.
Oh, it says.
Yeah.
That's what I learned to read. I could probably figure that out for myself.
Okay, yeah, so the Tyler Meadows is on 3.3 acres of property. And so just over 3 acres, again, with 2 unit per acre. They get 6 lots out of it. We don't round up for them. They've got 6 lots. They do vary in size, but all over the 12,000 square foot minimum.
Okay.
They meet the frontage requirements and the other things we would look for, as well as the length of the cul-de-sac, turnarounds, and so forth, are all in accordance with our standards and ordinances.
Thanks. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions, council? Anything? No. Councilmember Garn, any questions?
Have we taken?
I guess not. Councilmember
Have we
Adams.
taken any consideration into the neighboring homes to the west? I've heard concern that the grade is substantially higher, like lot. What is that up there? 5, whatever, on the corner. The first 2 on the left-hand side. That they are going to be towering over the existing homes to the west. Is there any kind of fencing or and I know it's been done before on planning commission and council that fencing's been required. Is there anything that we can do to help mitigate that? I know there's concern there, but I think that the folks in that area just are not the type that want to come and make waves, and but I know there's a deep concern there. Have we talked? Has that been addressed? Did the planning commission address that at all? Is there?
Perhaps I can speak to that, Councilman Adams, if that's appropriate to answer the question. So when the public hearing was held, there were a few neighbors there, but I don't believe there were actually any comments one way or the other towards it. I think they were just observing the process. The Planning Commission did not speak specifically to fencing. The concern, I don't believe, was brought up specifically. So it hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been discussed specifically. The ordinances do allow within our Title 19 subdivision ordinance that where a use is found to be incompatible with other uses, that fencing could be considered. So it has been seen in developments throughout the city, generally commercial next to a single family or multifamily next to single family or something that's a little more different. I can only guess single family in the single family area, it's didn't come up, simply.
Okay. Thanks,
All right, thank you. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move that we. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll move that we grant preliminary plat approval for Tyler Meadows Phase 2.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember DeCare, seconded by Councilmember Page. Any comments? I see no comments. Let's go to a vote. Councilmember Page.
Aye.
Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay. Ordinance amending Chapter 19-4, final plat of Title 19 subdivisions.
Okay. This one I don't need visuals, so I'll stand here before you. So the council recently approved Ordinance 1832. Accomplishing what this is just polishing up. So at the time the council approved the ability for the Planning Commission to act as the final approval body for a final plat. And there's repealer language in there, which we felt we were in the clear, but also to just be as concise and clear as possible within our ordinances, to not have any conflicting language, felt it would be appropriate. Where we found there's another couple sentences that contradicted. So accomplishing the same thing of a previous ordinance, again, to allow the Planning Commission to function as that final plat approval body. Minor note, in addition to that within this ordinance, just to reflect how we take in applications. It says previously that they would have to bring in 6 hard copies of a set of plans. That's often not necessary, and so we're requesting a copy and a digital copy just to reflect how we typically review things.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anybody signed up to speak to this item, so we'll go to council questions. Any questions? Councilmember Barber.
I looked this over. I realized that we discussed this at length previously when we passed it, but I think it's great to clean it up. My only thing, and it's very, very minor, was I was just going to say, can we even remove the requirement for the hard copy of the plat and just a digital if they would like? Just make it easier for people to apply this.
If it were the will of the council to do so, when we take in applications, usually at least for our files, we like to have a hard copy on hand. We still have staff that don't like to review things digitally, and so it gets passed around and they're able to leave comments on it. And if we don't require it, then they could choose not to do it, and that may handicap some people. Of course, we could make the prints, but then the cost is out of our pocket to do that for them.
Okay.
That was my only thing. It's just
Okay.
getting out of the way of making people actually have to physically come here. And It's maybe not necessary, but
Keep in mind, they're life-size sets, though. I mean,
Yeah.
so when you're looking at that,
Yeah.
and to read this teeny little slope on a sewer or whatever,
yeah. I just assumed we would print them out.
blowing
here,
your screen
but-
up all the time to look,
Okay.
Yeah.
it's helpful.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting
That's
at.
fair. That's totally
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Most
Right.
city engineers want that big copy.
And they just bring it
For-
up. And that's
for
fine.
visual.
That was my only. I
Yeah.
just wanted to
As,
get out of the way.
This is our techno gal over here.
Yeah.
We all know how to do this, right?
Not that kind of techno. like
We wouldn't be
technology.
far off from the ability to do that. Our
Yeah,
building
exactly.
department,
All right.
our
Thank
building
you.
official does do almost solely digital plan review.
Yeah.
At least
That's what I assumed, but
And so he's got the software and hardware to do that. You need big computer screens. You need certain software to do it, and not everyone's on
That's
board with
fine.
that. Or
I
Paper
just-
still
so
has a place.
we can
I
get
just
there.
like to get out of
It does.
people's way as much as possible. But if it has a place, it's a fine place. Let it stay.
Talking to
Right.
contractors.
All right.
Paper plan. Paper plan.
Bring it in.
Very good. All right,
That's
so
my thing.
if
Other
we
than
don't
that,
have any other
feel it's good.
questions at this time, then I would entertain a motion.
Well, I move that we approve the ordinance amending Chapter 19-4 final plat of Title 19.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember moved by Councilmember Page, seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments? None? All right, so let's go with Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 5-0. Okay, and continuing with the Lyle show, the last thing.
Okay, so another ordinance. This one's one that's been discussed quite a bit at length with the Planning Commission. Councilmember Page has probably witnessed several of those, and former commissioner and now Councilmember DeCare have been a party to this. There's been a lot. We always have interest in people wanting to do stuff in their backyard, so to speak. And more and more and more and more, we're getting requests from property owners and residents in the city to find ways to subdivide essentially in a flag lot manner. So flag lot being you have a driveway access, we call that the flag stem, back to the large part of a property where you can actually build on. So you have homes behind homes, mid-block type development. As we've discussed it as a planning commission, we've seen a number of scenarios where it could work. I think there's been a lot of back and forth on whether people even love flag lots anywhere, whether they make sense on cul-de-sac streets, and the like. We originally had a draft before the Planning Commission that essentially stated a cul-de-sac typically is at max 600 feet in length per ordinance in Kaysville City. And so we thought, well, not getting too much into the history, but if you want it, please ask me, and I'll try and go into it. But previously, Kaysville City did allow flag lots on cul-de-sacs, and we have them in town. There was an infill committee about 10 years ago that said, no more, and they put in language in the ordinance that just said, no flag lots on cul-de-sac streets. So that didn't matter if it was the end of the cul-de-sac on the bulb or the first house from the intersection. As the language states, just prohibits all of it if it's a cul-de-sac type street. And so having discussed with the Planning Commission all the different scenarios, vetting through to staff, some of the concerns they had, okay, if we have a limit on cul-de-sac length, do we have concerns about essentially extending that even farther by allowing these driveways back to properties that become further away from the through street? Utility questions came up. Can we service those with sewer lines and water and so forth, and emergency services, fire and emergency response efforts? And as we've gone through that internally, having a few in town hasn't been an issue. Technically, there aren't issues. Even the 600-foot cul-de-sac length that we have is, frankly, a little bit arbitrary, but you got to draw a line somewhere. And so, for fire code, for any other thing, we, at least as a staff, feel that we can handle them. And the reason that the ordinance is proposed as it is, the Planning Commission, as we discussed it, it became so difficult to say, okay, do we make another arbitrary line of 500 feet or 100 feet, or do we allow them or not? And what we decided on is, because the ability to do the flag lot requires the PRUD overlay zone, as a zoning action, it gives broad discretion to the council. So you could look at them case by case and say, here it makes sense, there it doesn't. There are still some standards, same as they have been, size, width of your access to it that will remain the same. So not every property will even be eligible for consideration, and those that are could come on a case-by-case basis through the rezone process for consideration. That is the essence of what the ordinance proposes, and be happy to take any questions.
Okay. We don't have anybody signed up to speak to this item, so we will go to council questions. It looks like Council Member DeCare might want to say something.
Well, so being on the Planning Commission for 5 years prior to this, we've discussed this ad nauseum on multiple occasions, and I think I'm certainly not a proponent of flag lots, and then throwing a flag lot on the end of a cul-de-sac that's like more better. So I think where my concern with this was, and on the record with the Planning Commission, was the whole, emergency response vehicle, extending utilities and sewer and water and, things along those lines. And I just think that I understand that the whole infill idea, and I know that there's a lot of parcels of property left in Kaysville that are going to need to be addressed through infill. I mean, we're kind of running out of space, and that's kind of the way it is. But I'd really like to think that there's better ways to go about doing it than putting flag lots on the end of cul-de-sacs. But that's my own personal opinion. But so that's kind of where it is.
All right. Do you have a question, though?
Oh, crap. No, I don't.
You
No,
gotta form that
absolutely
into a
no questions.
question.
We're gonna let you have
just
that
gave
one.
you my
It's your
opinion,
first
so.
meeting. So.
Sorry. Okay. Rookie mistake. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right,
I haven't
okay.
offended the entire body.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Good.
not at all.
You're
No.
good with the rest of us.
Good. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
We're in reality
All right. Anyway. All right. No question, but I'm already on the record for whatever else.
I have
A
a question.
Councilmember Barber.
A question that came up at the public comment at Planning Commission when they brought this up was just about the multiple flag lots per cul-de-sac. So would this ordinance, should we approve it, obviously we would have the discretion at the rezone, but this would allow any amount of flag lots in the cul-de-sac?
Theoretically, yes. So we don't allow more than a double flag lot. So that's too deep. We do have those on a typical street. So yes, the bulb of the cul-de-sac could theoretically have that if someone came in. We've looked at, we do have some situations in town and multiple streets where there are 3 or 4 flag lots on there, so we kind of looked at those maybe as examples. Has it been a problem or not? And a lot of that's subjective on how much you like it. But to that specific concern, the resident that came in kind of talked about 1 might be okay, 2 maybe too much, and so to start, there is a standard, so somebody has to have more property, both in acreage but also in street frontage, in order to do 2. So it won't be even possible to request it in every situation. And then again, even if they meet the minimum width and such requirements, you still have the ability, because of the zoning action, to say yes or no either way, based on how you feel it fits in that specific circumstance.
Okay. That answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Garn, do you have any questions on this?
I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything? No. Okay. If we don't have any questions, I will entertain a motion at this time.
A motion that we approve item G with the understanding that it essentially still has a spirit to it. It's case by case. Neighbors can still come in, and volley out why it should or shouldn't be. So I motion that we approve item G.
I'll second.
Okay.
And I'll second.
All right.
Well, we'll let
Okay. Okay, we'll give that to Jake.
That's a record.
I know. Motioned by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember Garn. Any comments at this time?
Mayor, I have a
Yes.
comment on this, if that's okay. I don't want to go out of order, but
No, it's you.
thank you. Yeah, it's I personally probably wouldn't be interested in a flag lot, but some of them actually that I've seen in the community walking around are really very nicely done, and I can see how that there'd be buyers for that, people that would want to live on that property and maybe not live on a main street, whatever. And so I think it's also highest and best use of maybe larger lots that can be further subdivided. I think my only concern would be the issues that have already been considered, and that is emergency response, how long is the cul-de-sac, and many of those questions have been answered, that it's not particularly a concern, and if it was in a particular situation, it would be addressed by the city and could be addressed by the council. So it's always a balance. Sometimes you want to put something into policy as a statement. Other times you want to leave it to the professional judgment in the particular situation. I think in this case, it doesn't really make sense to add the policy on number of lots because that can be addressed in other ways.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I had one more comment.
Councilmember Decatur.
So is as Councilmember Adams said, is this case by case then? So I mean, this isn't like carte blanche. We're just going to do whatever, right? I mean,
so the ordinance is applicable citywide. So
sure.
In that sense, it is not case by case. However, because it's part of the zoning action,
right,
it does allow case by case. Property owners receive notice. We're doing the mailers now within 500 feet, so people can come speak at a public hearing. Staff, we would give a recommendation, much as Councilmember Garn stated, that we do have concern in this case, or otherwise, notwithstanding the technical ability to allow something, it still allows the case-by-case discretion of the council to say yes or no as it sees fit for the health, public safety, and welfare of the city on whether or not you think it's appropriate at those locations.
So just because the ordinance exists, I mean, say we do approve this, which it looks like we're going to, say it doesn't, I mean, it exists, it can still be denied, though, based on each particular instance and scenario.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Council still supersedes.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. All right, anything else?
No, just a comment.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, this is long overdue, to be honest with you. Boy, we've had so many people talk about this, and I really don't like it when you just have an ordinance that just says you cannot, period, and everybody's hands are tied. This allows at least the conversation to go forward, and so I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to a vote. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 And Councilmember Garn?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0. All right. That's the end of our action agenda. We're moving on to our work items. Shane.
Thanks, Mayor. Item 6A there for the leasing policy document. At our last meeting, we talked about the importance of having some guidelines when it comes to leasing out property. And so some of us staff took your comments from the last meeting and drafted a policy document that's included there. The resolution below the staff report is the document, and maybe some of the highlights of that are that we would advertise it for a minimum of 21 days, that we'd advertise in an open manner, that we would do it in a sealed bid or confidential email fashion, and that all leases would be approved by the City Council. So I think we captured the general direction of the council in that, and of course we're in a work agenda item right now, so if you have any comments, we can take those and go back to the drawing board if we need to, or address this as an action item at the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any comments? First cat out of the bag? Council member?
Nope.
No? Okay. No questions. I think there was some, when we discussed this previously, there was some back and forth about sealed bid, confidential email. Do we want to have a discussion about that? It's either or here. Is that okay with everyone to have it either or? Is that good? Anybody want to speak to that?
Mayor, could I?
Yes, go ahead.
I think, and I apologize if it's worded that way, but our intent was to do it both. So to give actually a person the option, but not to say we only receive sealed bids or we only receive confidential emails, but to give them, if they want. We had in our last effort, we had people do both, just because
Okay.
they were very paranoid about getting it in. So
Okay.
our intent was
So
to
they
do
submitted
both.
it both ways.
They could do it either,
Filled in,
whatever's
no.
whatever's convenient for the lessee in this case.
Okay.
If we need to clarify that with the language, we can do that.
Now that you've mentioned that, that makes sense, how it's how it reads. Any concerns with this? Are we ready to move it to action agenda, or?
I have one more question.
Yes, Councilmember Barber.
So the lease agreement will come to the city council through the consent agenda, and obviously we can pull it out and discuss more, talk about it. Will the council, I know Shane does a good job of updating on lots of things throughout the city, but is there anything formal of updating on an open lease to the council other than just we'll see it on the website like everybody else?
No, and we can do something like that, but we hadn't thought of I guess we thought of vetting whether we should lease something out just in the staff level, but.
But we'll see. We will see.
I think when we do discuss this with potential lessees, we do say, this is what we will do, and the council will ultimately have the responsibility of saying yes or no, and until they say yes, don't get your hopes up. So.
Okay. I guess that's a comment. Never mind.
Okay. Well, any other questions? Councilmember Garn, do you have any questions on this?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If we don't have any questions, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I move that we move this item to a future action agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Page, seconded by Councilmember DeCare. Any comments? Councilmember Barber.
Oh, I do. My comment was that I think that's appropriate to not include anything formally about letting the council know. I mean, we can all keep up, and I think Shane does a good job of keeping us up to date on things, even if there's not ordinance, and if it ever becomes a problem, we can address it then.
Okay. Any other comments?
I mean, the only thing is
Adams.
where we're doing this kind of in semi-auction style format of, hey, chuck a number in. I guess it's not auction because you don't know what the other person is bidding. Silent auction format is kind of essentially what it is. The only thing about that is just to, making sure that, since that's the format we're using, then we need to make sure that there is absolute integrity around that format, because it's real easy to, it's the whole reason why we went through such a long span of procurement document revamping. It's really easy to kind of just, leak information. So we just need to maintain integrity around whatever vehicle we decide to use, because we've chosen the modality of saying, well, we're not going to put a price out there in the marketplace, which I like because it's got to be fair.
Yeah.
Because it's owned by, these properties are owned by every shareholder in the city equally. So it's got to be fair. And then there needs to be integrity to back up the fairness. There's some kind of nobody knows what the number is until there's 10 envelopes on the table. You open them up and it's like, okay, there's the person that gets the property. As long as the silent bid has the utmost integrity. It's great. I'm not questioning anyone's integrity either. Let's not go there. There was a spin on my comments earlier by someone in this room, a council member, and that wasn't called for, but I'm not questioning anyone's integrity. I'm just saying let's set this up full of integrity.
I have a question. Councilmember Adams, are you saying that whoever the top bidder is should absolutely get the
lease?
Get the lease. What if I'm wondering? Do we take into account what that is going to be used for? Are we allowed to bring that into it?
Well, I think you put a criteria on what the land can be used for before you do that. That's like saying, hey, what are you going to do with this property after when we rezone it? Yeah. Well, wait, I know it fits the zoning, but I don't want that restaurant. I want this one. So no, like we just set it up where here's the zoning of the land. Here's what's
as long
approved.
As it fits, then
if it fits the zone,
then it's okay.
Out of our hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Any other? Okay. So we've moved it, seconded it. We've had comments. I think we're ready to vote on this to move it to an action item. Councilmember DeCare.
Aye.
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 Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. iPad discussion.
As Councilmember Hanson was needed to resign, we were talking about his iPad, and Ryan and I were just having a conversation about how, as we went paperless, one of the caveats to that was that the city would own the iPads. And Ryan was just expressing to me how that's not wouldn't be his preference, and it isn't ideal for the way that he manages the devices in the city. They're very restricted when they are the property of the city, and he's also he's extremely not interested in having your 4-year-old iPad back as part of something we would use in the city. His recommendation, as is mine, is that when a city council member takes office, they're provided an iPad, and that is their iPad to download games or uses their city iPad or do whatever they want with. And we would obviously still be there for network support and assisting where we need to be, but it would just be a lot easier and probably less expensive for the city, as those are all in our support network and are paid a couple of dollars a month to support them. It'd be easier for us if we just didn't have those as part of the city's devices. I asked Ryan to come in here and answer any questions you might have. And we don't need a motion here. We probably don't even really need to action, but we just want to. I'm open to that, whatever you'd like to do here, but we're just looking for some direction from you.
Okay, and I would like to mention the sheer volume of paper that we save and the man hours to make copies, I think more than compensates over 4 years the amount of money that we spend on an iPad. It's actually it's more convenient, obviously, but I think it's a wash when it comes to the money when you factor in the time and resources that go into doing a print packet. Any feelings about this, Councilmember Page?
I just have a question. Can we talk to Ryan? It's for Ryan, actually.
Yes.
We'll go to the guy that knows. So tell me the process. Typically, how does it work when somebody's elected or appointed to the council? Do you just go out and you buy a new one for that?
Yeah, we'll just go to our state contract and purchase that iPad from the state contract, and then we just issue that iPad to one of you. Yeah.
So what you're doing is that's how you update it constantly. You just the rollover and stuff like that.
Well, we're not doing any maintenance to your iPads specifically. You're doing that.
When I say update it, I have iPads. I have a whole drawer full of them, and my goodness, they're out of date so quickly. And I guess so. When you buy the new ones, you get the latest version, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so you stay on top of the technology.
Right. Yeah, we would purchase the latest version except in the case of the previous councilman and now Stroh DeCare. We just took one from James and gave it to Stroh. But I prefer not to do that every 4 years. I'd prefer to have just issue a brand new one and then let you guys keep your old ones. Typically what we do, and I mean, up until like the last couple of years, we really have stayed away from all tablet-type computers. We've only allowed Windows desktop computers in a domain environment where we have very strict controls on what can be installed. We have a web filter that we push all of our applications through, and we prevent people from going to specific websites. And we never had that capability a couple years ago to do that with iPads or tablets for that matter. But now we are using an MDM, which is a mobile device manager. And with the mobile device manager, we can control all kinds of things on those tablet devices. So when I have a department that needs an iPad, we enter it into the MDM, and then we have control over that device. We can locate it. We can restrict websites. We can essentially make it so they can't install any applications. So Netflix doesn't go on there. It is a city business only device, and that's the difference between what's happening with our employees versus your iPads. Your iPads are unrestricted. They're not in an MDM. And so my preference is since we're not managing those in any way, shape, or form, I'd rather not have them be the property of Kaysville City. I'd like those to be your property, if that makes sense.
Okay, just one more question. So
Sure.
basically, when it all comes down to it, what you want to do is you want to allow the council to have freedom with these things, knowing that at the end of their service, they're going to be able to keep that.
That's right. Yeah.
So they feel like they can. I'll be honest with you, I have nothing personal on this at all. I mean, I just don't.
Yeah.
And but you know what? If I knew that this wasn't going to be turned in, I probably would.
Yeah.
And I'd utilize it for personal things as well.
And I think that's totally realistic and fair, I think, for you, for council,
Okay.
in my opinion.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
Mayor,
Councilmember Garn.
And I'll go in the order, whatever order you want.
Go ahead.
We'll let you go first.
Okay. Yes, I have two questions. One has been partially answered already, and that is, if it's personal and city business, is there any concern from an IT security perspective? For example, the state puts a program called AirWatch on all personal devices so that it's monitored and there's security there. However, those devices can also access a network, and I guess in this case the difference is that we're using sort of on the other side, we're not on the inside of the firewall for the city, but we're on the outside. And
Yes.
so that's why it wouldn't be a security concern to have it not be monitored. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, so all domain devices are inside the network, and domain devices have very specific security profile, essentially. But like phones and iPads and any kind of tablet, we keep those outside of our domain, outside of our network. So, for example, when you connect to the internet here in the building, you're actually physically separated by a firewall from all network resources that are Kaysville City owned. So you're prevented from accessing pretty much anything that's on the network unless we've specifically allowed it through the firewall. And that might be an application like Citrix, which not many of you use. Email is another one. But those are very specific IP imports that we allow through the firewall. So if that makes sense. Yeah, so we really don't have like any security risks that way. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I have one other question. This might be a question for Shane, since Dean's probably not there this evening. And that is, obviously, a new iPad has a value, and you're not giving it to a council member. That would be a form of compensation. So I would imagine that would be included for tax purposes on a council member's 1099. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that, Councilmember Garn. That seems reasonable, but that's something that I haven't even thought of. That's a great question. And Dean was here, but he did have to make an airport run, so he has left the building.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be something that we'd want to be sure and follow up on.
Okay.
I assume.
Good question. Councilmember Barber.
I was just going to say, I think that the council-owned is the proper way to go because it takes the pressure off you. And I just appreciate you guys bringing this up where it wasn't technically, required, but just to be up and at the forefront so everybody knows what's expected. I think that's a really good policy to follow. Thank you.
Councilmember DeCare, do you have
Nope,
something?
I'm good.
All right. Councilmember Adams.
I'm always a fan of discussion, don't get me wrong, but I do have to take the liberty to point out that council members have been snidely rebuked in the past for not reaching out to department heads for such frivolous questions and things. The amount of time that just transpired on this, why aren't you asking these two why they didn't reach out to Ryan and settle these petty issues beforehand? Just kind of a comparison here.
It's a policy decision. It's a policy decision that we need to make as a group.
Call it however you will.
Yeah.
Everything we do is a decision we make as a group. And just 2 weeks ago, I got told, well, why didn't you reach out to the department head and resolve all these before you came here? So I'm just saying, I like discussion, but let's point it out here. Let's point out the other side of the blade. Now, the other thing is, where are the iPads since the iPads came into play, where are the ones with, council members who are no longer here, where are those iPads? Do they have them? Do we have them?
Yeah, for example, Councilman Snell, the mayor, Councilman Lee, those 3 iPads were auctioned off. We cleaned up those iPads and we put them on the public auction, and they were sold via auction.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I trust your ability to erase a computer.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. So I think we need to have a decision. Give direction.
Direction.
Give direction to staff.
In a motion, do we want to?
What do you think?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
That's
a motion
probably
would be good.
even if it's not, legally binding, it's direction. That'd be good.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to look at it.
How about direct staff to?
Yeah, I would just make a motion to direct staff to continue to gift the iPads to elected officials.
Okay. And a second.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been motioned by Councilmember Barber and seconded by Councilmember DeCare. And whose turn is it? Councilmember, yes, comments. Go ahead.
Just
anything?
If there's a better way to phrase that.
I think
Adams,
the intent is there.
I just don't know if I phrased that.
Okay, Councilmember Adams.
Me, I'm not black and white. I'm not. You did great. Nay, on the paralysis, the parameters of that's just where I've been since the beginning on this. So.
Aye.
Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passes 4-1. Okay.
I want to clarify, just so Ryan's not upset. I mean, like, even having us have iPads. I love what Ryan's doing by saying you guys keep them. Sorry.
All right.
I just don't want to have that disconnect with you. So thanks for letting me do
I
that.
still have one for you if you want it.
No, I don't want it.
It's on my desk. I can give it to you right now.
Never wanted from the beginning, but I love what you're doing by saying you guys just take them, keep them. So, but I just disagree with iPads in general. So, thanks, Ryan.
Okay. All right. Shane, spatial needs.
This item, Mayor and Council, as Councilmember Barber and I are having a conversation about the needs of the city, as we've talked about the library building, a lot of people have been throwing around different square footages that the city needs, and I've heard 10,000 the most, and that's kind of the one I think is the most accurate, but I got the sense that nobody really knew where that came from or why we were using that number, so I wanted to have if you'll indulge me, maybe I could just talk for a few minutes, and then we could have a discussion and answer some questions. The number that we're using is 10,000. It's actually 9,858, and that comes from the spatial needs portion of this Kaysville City Facilities Master Plan. So, when this was done in 2015, part of what was done was a spatial needs assessment, where the consultant sat down with each department head, went over what their duties are, what they might be required to need from a personnel perspective, even from an equipment perspective, at build out. So we were looking at our 45,000 population number that you've probably heard batted around here and there. So they took all the department heads. They had several meetings. In fact, if it's okay, I'm going to read just a little bit of this document where it talks about the needs assessment. It says, the process by conducting individual interviews with designated representatives from each department involved or identified to be included as part of the master plan process. Through these interviews, department operations and activities were discussed, specific space requirements were quantified, existing and future equipment requirements were evaluated, and the potential for future growth or other changes were identified. Following the individual interviews, combined workshops were held with all participants. The space needs of each department were compiled for the workshop, and each user group was tasked to explain and often defend their request. The consultant was able to facilitate this discussion, providing alternative suggestions derived from expertise gained with other municipalities in the planning and design of their public facilities. This workshop also provided the opportunity to discuss the test possible multi and shared use of the facilities, specifically in regards to the operations center and the former library building. So I just wanted you to hear from them, as somebody who wasn't here when this took place, and I don't think any of you were either, the methodology that went into it. I think that's kind of important to understand.
Can I
Sure, please.
Remind me, was that in 2015 that happened, or was that more recently?
I think it took place in 2015 and it was presented in April of 2016, if my memory serves correctly.
Okay. It was November of 2015.
Oh, November 2015. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this is right before the election of three of you. That's right.
Okay.
If you look in your packet there on page, it's page 42 of the PDF, you'll see a couple of what look like spreadsheets. And when I first looked at these, they were very, very confusing to me. I didn't understand them at all. So I wanted to just kind of break down where that 9,858 square feet is coming from. So if you look at the very first page, it's talking about the municipal center, and that's page 42. That is going through, so after this needs assessment was done, that went through all the different departments and said, okay, here's what the needs are of each department. And so the bottom line there is a need of administration of 12,261. Keep in mind that number is taking out legal, community development, and the building department. So they were anticipated to be moving to the library. That was the consultant's idea. So the 12,261 is a plan, a guess, of what the administration side of the city would need at build-out besides community development, building, and legal. We have 8,828 usable square feet in this building. So the difference of that is 3,438. So of the 10,000 that we say, that's 3,400 that's that need. Then if you look at what legal, community development, and building need, and that's I think on the next, probably not the next page, but maybe page 44 there, it talks about what they need. And I think they identified, there you go, it's super small and really hard to read, and you can really look at the details if you can zoom in and look at recorder and accounting and the different square footages there. But the consultant identified legal, community development, and building inspection needing 6,420 square feet. So if you combine the 6,420 with the 3,438, we get 9,858. So that's really what the 10,000 square feet above and beyond what we have is where we get that need. And I also guess would put a couple more little caveats in there that storage is a real problem for us as well. So none of this takes into account storage. So as the building department puts storage in their attic, and we ask employees to climb up and rummage through the attic for their storage. I think the community development department mostly puts their storage in this old shed here to the east. I know a lot of the admin put their storage in the police department. those all seem like very temporary storage places. So as we've talked about needing 10,000 square feet for office, we've also said we really need storage, and I can't overstate that from Cole and Ryan's perspective about that
Shane,
storage.
did we have a number for that storage? I can't.
It's not. It wasn't part of the assessment, so it's just something that we would like to consolidate all those places.
That's a line item, but
No, it's like paper storage.
Yeah, well, and even server storage is not even what I'm talking about, which is more like documents and. I mean, that's a good point. We need places for servers to go, and I think right now most of them are at the
police station. Yeah, and that was
station.
Broken down in here, but yeah, it would be good to have a number or approximation of. I know it's hard, and
sure.
if you
I think
look
we
at
could
it,
take a guess.
Are we legally required to store all of these, paper documents? And how long is it?
Right, and that's really what we've traditionally stored probably almost everything. And you're right, we have Maria, what are those called? The rules of when retention schedules. That's right, correct. Thank you. For certain things, and we're trying our best to just scan things and let go of the hard copy. It's been hard for us to do it. I know. You're right. We do need to do that. It's in the cloud, right? It'll be fine.
It's fine.
It's up there somewhere. But we're trusting that more and more. But at the same time, we still do have things that we have to have physical paper copies for, and we're required to do that.
We just need. It would be nice to just have an approximate number.
Yes.
All right. So
we can do that.
Bottom line, the square footage that we're aiming for is
9,858 more square feet than we have today.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, here's a question too. I haven't, like you say, it's hard to look through there. So I'm sitting here like this.
Yes.
On the building department, for example, at build out, I guarantee you it'll be less. We'll need less manpower at build out than we do now, because we're already started that trend. I mean, Lyle could tell you that. We're having, I mean, as we go forward and less land, we're not going to build. I mean, the amount of houses are just going to continually go down on how many houses can actually be built. So in theory, that's probably true. We only have 3. We have a building official and 2 building inspectors. So we're going to need somebody. We can't get rid of all of our. I mean, I think the nature of building will change drastically. It will.
But there will still be a need. Now, whether that's can we get rid of one of those 2 building inspectors? Maybe we can.
Well, I
guess hopefully they took into account that in the needs assessment. They could say, yes, we're going to go that direction.
See, that's the question I had. Is does that take that into account, or do they say, well, according to population, we're going to need 5 people in that office or 5 inspectors?
I don't think they think that. I think they're kind of holding pat with what they had, and I'm basing that off of my conversations with Mike, who I sat down with this, and he feels like it's very conservative. Mike, he's going to tell you what he thinks. He was very, very adamant that 10,000 should be the minimum that we're shooting for, above and beyond what we have now. Keep in mind that we don't have a break room, and I know nobody needs to cry for us that we don't have a break room, but it's something I hear a lot, that it's a quality of life thing, and we don't have a copy room. We have copiers in hallways, and we've got where Jordan is back here now. So again, we're getting by fine. The mayor and I took a little field trip today down to the new portable down at the ops center, and it's great. It's junky, but it's going to work. It's cool, at least in there. The AC was working, and they're going to be able to put 3 to 5 people in there, and Josh already has who he's lined up to have, and Gary's got somebody he'd like to be in there too. So those are fine, and those are things that we can work with. But I also believe that we are more productive, and we are better employees, and we get more done, and we're able to do it in a better way when we have the proper space to work in. And I think the easy answer for some is just put 2 and 3 people in one office, and I don't think that's a productive way to operate. And I think that hopefully these numbers kind of bear that out. But anyway.
Okay.
Councilmember Barber.
On that, 2 or 3 people in an office, I think maybe that's something we can discuss. Is obviously we don't have a building design yet, but offices are evolving in how we all work. I work in a cubicle. I think most people do these days. Do we have like a specific requirement for who has an actual office versus an open floor plan, which could be a lot more space saving?
No, I don't think that's going to be completely up to us if we're building new office space. And I'm sure you are aware of how it works in Silicon Valley and places where people can come and just plug in their laptop to any place. Now, we would probably need suitable meeting space if that's the way we're going to do things. Our conference room is absolutely undersized. We meet over here in this room very often because we can't fit the number of people in that conference room. But if we're taking all those things into account, I think we ought to look at all modern advances in seating and those kinds of things. There's some folks that have meetings where they need the door closed, and that's we need to keep that in mind. But absolutely, could we do that? Yes.
And somehow a resident was asking me about if we'd have office space for council. I don't see that on here, nor do I see a need for us to have that. But a shared
not going to happen
room. Just
you can use my office if you need it.
I would rather use a shared nice space. But that's what I'm just saying is those shared spaces can be really versatile. They could be for when council needs it. Quite often we have that.
Yeah, I don't think that was taken to the needs assessment. I don't think we carved out any space for council.
I was glad that I didn't see it in there. I don't know where that notion came from, but I know who to blame. Anyway.
Right. Again, another item that probably doesn't need any action. I just wanted you to, when you talk about that 10,000 square feet, or you hear it, I wanted you to know that there was some science behind it. It's a moving target. It's an art. We'd probably change what we did there, probably. After 3 years, but I was happy to see the methodology and what went into it. So,
okay. Any more questions about space needs? Not. All right.
Mayor, this is Jake.
Go ahead, Councilmember Garn.
Yes, Shane. Has there been any discussion at all about using telework? For example, I know there's a lot of positions you can't have linemen, police officers, first responders, water department, snow plowers. I mean, they can't telework, right, from home. But are there some administrative positions, perhaps, in the city that could also reduce the need for more office space by doing telework?
Absolutely, and I think that probably goes back to Councilmember Barber's comment about that flexible workspace. That would even be better as we allow maybe somebody to do that. We do have several employees that do work from home on one day a week. We've allowed that the phones can ring to their home and they can answer them just like they were at work. I know we've allowed for some flexible scheduling. When Ryan, our IT director, and Jordan, our GIS coordinator, were in the same office, they did a flexible schedule where one was off on a Monday or one was off on a Friday, and I think Jordan worked down at the Ops Center one day. So they were allowed to do that, so they would only have 2 or 3 days when they're sitting in the same office and trying their best not to distract each other. So we are certainly open to that, and we want to be as progressive on those kinds of things as we possibly can be to accommodate where we are today.
Councilmember Adams.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, going off what Michelle, Councilwoman Barber, was saying about cubicles and stuff, I fully agree. I mean, I've been able to observe a 10 plus whatever $1 million annual company who operates about 18 employees in a space no greater than this. Not even on one level, it's not greater than this, and there's half level up above it. And they have what they call the fishbowl down on the main floor, and there are 3 workstations in there, and there is a just little work center for people who don't really need a full-time office. They can sit down, they can do their daily paperwork, and they can go. But there's 3 guys, with their computers and workstations set up, what they call the fishbowl. I just want to say that, I really wish. This might come across rude, but surprise, surprise. This looks more like a wants list to me than a needs. I'd like to see a want list, versus a need list. We can set the bar what we think that we will offer, and, I don't like the threat of, well, no one will apply to work here. I disagree. So I just think, everyone needs an office, everyone needs this, everyone needs that. Well, we can't go answer to the taxpayers for that. There's a lot of stuff going on in the city over this topic right now, and it does come across. And it's not you didn't create the study, so I'm not pointing at you, but we paid for this study. So I do, I got concerns over stuff like that when we pay someone to build a study for us and we kind of nudge them the way we want them to make it go. So yeah, it looks a lot like a wants list, and I don't agree with that much space being needed. I think the square footage in the library right now is a ton of space. It will relieve a lot of pressure. That office right there, if there's one person in that not to pick on you, Ryan, sorry. And it sounds like you at least are willing to share an office with Jordan at least 2 days a week. But if you split that office right in half, those are pretty decent sized offices. I don't know how much. I don't know. I think it's very obvious after 2.5 years now that I look at needs. What's really needed? There's a company here in town who has operated for 40 years in probably 65% of this whole space here. Mr. Page over here knows them very well. He's been in their offices multiple times. 30 years he was in visiting them, and they do just fine. I think there's a lot of wants going on here. It's going to be a lot of work.
I think the staff that went through that process would disagree with you respectfully. So, like I mentioned, I talked to Cole.
I think the residents would disagree with you.
They might. We might have a difference of opinion there. But Cole, Mike, and Andy in the meeting I was in expressed that they felt like what came out of the needs assessment was needs and was very conservative.
Okay.
But even with Councilmember Page's commentary, if I understand his sentiment right, I caught half of it, was that we're past the bell curve on growth in the city. We're coming down the hill now on build out. So, yeah, I disagree. I mean, one could argue, well, not picking on Chief here, but the need for police doesn't come down. It gets worse as we hit build out. But the need for construction management, engineering management goes down as we come closer to build out. So.
Councilmember Barber, did you have something? Okay.
No.
All right.
I might.
You might. Councilmember Page.
Just a comment. We need to remember when this building was built, we had, talking to Lyle, we had what did we figure, 11,000 citizens? We're 33,000 now.
10 to 15 somewhere.
Yeah. And, I don't know. When they moved in, did we have 8 offices not being used and all that? No, I think they used them. But I think that there comes an economic scale, too, that you got to be careful about to make sure that productivity increases. And, you're able to work. And then there's something to be said about work environments as well. I've had the same people that Dave has talked to Councilman Adams as well. And, they would like to see 4 people in every office. And I guess we could do what Lyon's doing and stand up and everybody did play that game. But I think that, we need to look at it and do the best we can and think out of the box and everything else. But, penny wise and pound foolish. You be careful.
All right. Thank you, Shane.
There, just a point
yes,
of order real
Councilmember
quick. Have we moved to the comment place? And I don't want to go out of order as hard when I can.
It's a work item.
We're actually not going to make any motions on this. It was more an informational item. So any comments would be perfectly in order.
Okay, yeah, I guess my comment, it's always a interesting thing. There's a lot of expenses, but if you look at the city budget, it's primarily salaries. It really is, because the city primarily provides services. They don't really have that many buildings. My assessment of the operations center, for example, is it is overcrowded. It definitely needs more space there. And definitely the office space, there's a need for more office space as well when you have trailers. But I think it's important to put the cost of buildings in context, and I'm not necessarily looking at the maintenance of buildings, because I understand you have utilities, but the newer buildings, of course, are much more maintenance friendly. The newer they are, the more the ongoing cost of utilities is less because they're much more efficient. And take the police station, for example. I did a little rough calculation, and don't hold me to this, but if that building lasts 50 years, if it has 50 years of service, which it should last easily, 50 years, and you compare that to the $4 to $5 million operational budget for the police department, which is largely salaries, the cost of the police station is only about 2%, 1 to 2%, in between 1 and 2% of the total cost of running the police department over that 50 years. So while we should save money everywhere that we can and be as efficient as we can, in every way try to utilize new technologies to keep costs down and not have to raise taxes, I think it is important to look at the context of expenses, and the largest expense is always going to be your salaries. While we want to keep buildings, we don't want to build buildings just to build them unless we need them, and I don't think anybody's advocating for that. But it is a relatively small cost for the small number of buildings the city operates and maintains compared to the cost of personnel.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Garn. All right, so thanks for the information, Shane. So I think we're ready to move on to review of an ordinance amending section 16-1-4, and we had the public hearing about this previously. So go ahead.
Having presented it once, I'll just be just about as brief, if not briefer. But this ordinance essentially represents a little bit of a paradigm shift for Kaysville City. Currently, we require that all home businesses be licensed, but based on the way the state statute reads, if they qualify as what we would consider a minor home occupation, essentially no impact within the neighborhood, we cannot charge them fees, even though we're requiring licenses be obtained. This change proposed in the ordinance, again with the paradigm shift and then a change in state statute, what we would be saying is you're not required to have a license anymore. You don't really create an impact, but if you would like one, you're going to require services and time and money from city staff to print licenses or process paperwork, whatever it is, then you get to pay what we hope is a nominal fee to cover those costs should they volunteer to obtain one. So unlike the other items which have been vetted through the Planning Commission, this is a fresh start. So if you'd have any discussion points or anything that you'd like to bring up or changes you'd like to suggest before we move to an action item, I'd like to have that discussion now.
Okay. Councilmember DeCare.
I have one quick question. So what constitutes a minor? I mean, I know the whole home occupation. I get all that stuff. I mean, we did it for years and stuff. But what constitutes something where you wouldn't collect fees as to something that you would? Maybe looking at like eyelash extensions for one, and then like a handyman service for the other, or something. Or I mean, what?
Yeah. So the state has a specific definition that says. And we just essentially mirror that in this proposed ordinance. So if the home occupation does not have an offsite impact that materially exceeds the offsite impact of a primary residence alone, then they're essentially exempt. So what does that mean? We've looked at that internally, and we have different categories of home business licenses within our ordinances. So we have an agricultural home occupation that are only allowed in certain zones. They might do auto repair, small engine work, major home occupations, contractors, bigger equipment, or customers that are coming to and from the house based on the type of business, hair salons, we've got those all over town. A minor home occupation would essentially be no customers, no equipment. You have a home office, maybe even if that. You sell products on your computer. It never even comes to or from your house. You do bookkeeping or something. And we suspect, we've mentioned this to a lot of businesses as they've come in, that you don't have to pay this year. You may next year. Many of them have been businesses for several years in Kaysville and have been used to the $30, which is part of our fee schedule, and keeping that up. Often think that's reasonable. When we first took off the fee, a lot of them laughed and said that it's silly that you guys are doing this work without charging. But we feel it's important, at the very least, for those who want it to offer licenses. Some communities have just said, if we're not recouping any cost, we're not going to give you a license. But many want it for a bank account, or if they're a subcontractor, proof of legitimate business, or for their customers. And so if they come in and decide, yeah, well, I need it for my purposes, then we would charge those costs for those, again, no impact, essentially, type businesses.
One other follow-up real quick. Just a ballpark estimate, nothing, whatever. How much are we looking at here that's generated in those fees, really?
Yeah, so it is a bit of a guess. So if everybody that we have now were to decide they wanted to have a license, it's about $15,000. So we roughly have 500 businesses on any given year that would fit into this little category at $30 a pop. There would be some additional revenue potentially from new businesses, so ebbs and flows, but we probably do minor home occupation, maybe 10 new almost every month. So 120 times 15, so you might have, won't do the math on the fly, but a couple $100 there. Pretty minor. So the 15 grand is that ongoing revenue, which is potential. I don't suspect, again, looking into the crystal ball, I don't know how many would come back. Maybe half of that. And it's frequently, so with a minor home occupation, because they're so low, we don't really even know they're out there until they come to us.
Yeah.
Right. You go drive around the neighborhoods, we see some things on occasion that, hey, you need to come to our planning commission, or you need to obtain a business license. But if they truly fit in this category, the only way we're finding out about it is essentially through them. And so they're, in a sense, almost already volunteering. So it could be pretty high, the number of businesses that desire to keep that licensure. But certainly it will be less than the 488 if we're not mailing them every year saying you need to pay to renew your license.
Okay. Councilmember Barber?
Can you make comments, or is it just
Yeah,
questions?
you can make
Okay.
comments.
So I maybe have a different take on this, but I followed this legislation pretty closely when they said that we couldn't charge a fee, then they're coming back and giving the option, that we couldn't issue licenses, and now we can. So, essentially, we can issue if needed, but we can't require it for these home-based. And then we can create a fee if we would like. And so I don't think that $15,000 is anywhere near what we're going to be seeing in the future, because I think most people, if they realize they don't have to, probably won't come in unless they're required to, I would say, unless they really feel the need. So I like the sentiment of making us as friendly as possible to businesses. I absolutely applaud allowing the license if they need it. A lot of them need it for their type of work, so I think it's great we offer that. I don't really see the huge benefit to the city in charging them the fee, the setup fee or the yearly fee that they would come to. I just think it might be nice to say they can come get it just like they get other things from the city. So that's just my thought.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Garn.
Jake, yeah. I have a little different perspective on it. I look at this almost like a grandma request. So when a grandma request comes in, there's a cost there. And even small costs, even if there aren't that many people who actually would elect to have a license, although they're not required to have one, those who may need one for some purpose, there's a cost to the city. And even though it may be relatively small, it should be charged, and to pay for that time that is taken away from other city duties that could be taken care of. I don't see it as a revenue source at all for the city. It's certainly not as a matter of fact, it can't be a revenue source under state law. It can only cover the cost, the reasonable cost, or the estimated cost of preparing the license and providing it to the requestor. But it is definitely a service to the business, and there should be a charge sufficient to cover the cost of providing that license.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Garn. Anything else? All right.
No comment for me.
Okay. All right. So I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll move to move this to the action agenda. This item to the action agenda.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember Page. Comments?
Another comment.
Councilmember Barber.
So the ordinance itself doesn't specifically state the prices of the fees. It just says that we can charge a fee, and the fees will be dictated in the fee schedule that we put together.
Correct. We currently have them as part of the fee schedule from previous years, and they would be adjusted through that process.
Yeah. And so we could approve this ordinance as it is, stating that we can charge the fee if they come in and request, but then we can adjust the amount later on.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay. Councilmember Page.
Aye.
Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passes 5-0. All right. All right. It's call to the public. We have one person signed up, but I don't see anybody here. If there was a Ronald McDonald out in the out in the lobby, we'd be glad to hear from you.
What are the odds?
I know, right? That's so weird.
Maria. Something to confess here.
Okay. I guess Ronald had to go home. Let's do council-member reports. I'm going to start with Councilmember DeCare. He has a lot to report on. You went to...
Oh, yes. Sorry. Okay. I was thinking it's just like joke time.
She
like,
scripted this with you.
UAMPS conference. Really good up in Logan. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Shane and I were up there with Bruce Rigby and a couple members of the Power Commission. Really, really good couple of days up there. Lots of good ideas, lots of good things to take away from that. So I'll be meeting with Bruce here next week, and we'll be sitting down and having a conversation on how to move things forward with myself as the liaison and the power company, and we'll go from there. So
Okay, thank you.
Pretty exciting.
All right. Anything from Parks and Rec?
We're just looking at our current parks. Pioneer Park is coming along really well. We're going to have an opening there, and then just an overview of what other needs we have for parks. We have an agenda item that'll be coming back in September to maybe expand our parks, and so we're working really closely, and we would love feedback from residents on what they'd like to see.
And also, school is going to be starting this next week, so everybody watch for little people going to and from school. But with that, I believe Youth City Council is probably gearing up again, and Youth Court. I would love to attend with you at least once. If you could help me know when things are, I'd love to go with you guys at least one time. Probably more, but I would love to visit with them. How about community development? Anything?
Yeah, I just a comment, and especially for Lyle since he's here. I tell you, this guy has put a lot of time into this and trying to clean up our ordinances and everything. And I know the Planning Commission, they've been working on this as well. And I just want to just say, there's a big need. You don't realize this until people call you and they're frustrated a little bit. And so I appreciate so much the staff where you can go to them and you talk to them about these kind of issues with the people, and we're doing something about it, and I think it'll make the process so much easier for people. It's a stressful time when you're trying to rezone or trying to build a home or whatever, and I think this makes it a lot better.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Garn, do you have anything on Public Works?
No, I do not have an official report of any kind, but I would just like to express my appreciation again for Josh Belknap and for the entire Public Works staff and the work that they do to keep us all running, keep the water flowing and the streets patched and everything. And I just really appreciate what they do. And so grateful for their service to our community.
And something I learned at a water conference just recently, and that's under Public Works, is you can live without your power for a while, but if your water is contaminated, people are going to die. And so we really appreciate the work that our Public Works Department does. So it's okay to drive over bumpy roads, but as soon as people start dying, that is really serious. So, and we don't have that problem here. So grateful for safety in that way. All right.
I just have a quick comment, Mayor.
Please.
Just I was able to Google quickly and learn about the government contract stuff. So when a vendor has the government contract, right, they're kind of like the go-to, but it doesn't prohibit us from bidding it out. So if that preferred vendor, if I understand it properly, who has that contract, they have the right in a official bidding process, if another vendor comes with a lower price, that vendor gets the right, I believe, to match or beat. So potentially, I'm just using this as an example, I'm not beating a dead horse or pointing a finger, but the tractor tonight, it could be started over again. Since we're just going, well, let's go with the state contract, it could potentially be just started over, it's bid out, using it as an example, right? And obviously we have the authority, we could say, okay, let's use this as an example, let's try it out, let's see if we get a $8,000 cut on it. But, you know, if you're in the seat and you know that because they know if it's being bid or not. So if you're in that seat, I mean, all these things are designed to keep integrity in place. That's why we have this whole procurement policy. I just think it behooves us to say, yeah, you know what, especially going forward. You know, like the iPads with Ryan, I mean, that's minuscule. You know, I get that. That's maybe not a good use of his time. A $100,000 purchase? I don't think we should say, yeah, give it to us. And, oh, by the way, they know it's not being bid out because they have a knowledge if it is or not. So there's just ways to tighten up the screws, and I think that's what our duty is.
All right, thank you. Calendar items. Do we have anything coming up that you know of?
There's some, like our
Councilmember Barber
movie in the park, our last one,
yes.
coming up on Saturday.
That's
and then
good.
we have our Cool Cars event coming up in September.
Actually,
no,
August
sorry.
26th?
I'm already moving to the next month.
Right.
Yeah, August 26th.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we'll have a lot of stuff with school.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. All right, we will now recess, have a 10-minute break, and then come back to a closed session. All right? 10 minutes.
Something
like that.
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
5.
5. We can do it in 5. All right.
Make a motion to do that?
Yes, let's
you
do
did.
a motion.
I move we have a 5-minute recess and then go into our closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Right?